The hotel manager called and said, "Ma'am, there's been a mistake. Your husband checked in yesterday under your name with a young woman. Your son asked me to keep it a secret." I replied, "That's impossible. He's at home with the grandkids." His voice trembled. "Please, come to the front desk immediately. That's not even the worst part." Dear listeners, I am glad to welcome you. If this story touches the strings of your soul, please support our channel. Subscribe, hit the like button, and be sure to write in the comments which state or country you are listening from. I'm always interested to know how far my words travel. And now, enjoy the listening. The heat was disrespectful. The air at the lake house was thick and sticky, heavy with the scent of overripe peaches falling into the tall grass, and the sweet, cloying aroma of the peach preserves I was boiling in a massive pot on the screened-in porch. Somewhere deep in the yard, I could hear the shrieks of my grandsons, 5-year-old Malik and 7-year-old Trey. They were tearing through the grass like two little hurricanes, destroying everything in their path. I felt exhaustion settling into my spine like heavy lead. I stood at the stove, stirring the bubbling brew with a wooden spoon. The muscles in my back ached. At 64, I still held my posture. It was a habit developed over years of working in the district attorney's office, where any sign of weakness could be taken as an invitation to attack. But today, that armor felt heavy. The morning had started with a whirlwind. Kendrick, my son, had flown into the house, flashing that $1,000,000 smile he always used to disarm me. The smile for which I had too often forgiven mediocre grades in school, failed exams in college, and later the endless requests for small loans for his genius business ideas. "Mama, you're the best," he exclaimed, leaving the boys in the hallway with their backpacks. "Pop and I will be back Sunday evening. It's a purely male excursion. Fishing, tents, mosquitoes. But you understand, we need this time." Male bonding. He kissed me on the cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne. Oud wood, I recognized it. Far too sharp and pricey for a fishing trip to the creek. I noted it then, just as I used to note evidence in old cases, but I immediately pushed the thought away. Reginald, my husband, had been complaining about his heart lately, about his nerves, about how I crushed him with my authority. If fishing with his son would help him feel better, let them go. I took on the grandkids, the lake house, the preserves, and the familiar role of the foundation upon which this shaky house rested. Now by mid-afternoon, the house had turned into a battlefield. A box of Legos was scattered across the living room floor. In the kitchen, a puddle of spilled juice spread across the tile. I wiped my forehead with my forearm. The silence of the DA's office seemed like an unattainable dream right now. There was order there. There were rules. Here, chaos reigned, and I was obligated to organize it because there was no one else. All my life, I had been the fixer, the one who pays the bills, the one who turns a blind eye to the little things to preserve the main thing. The phone rang sharply, slicing through the thick country air. I sighed, turned down the heat under the pot, and went into the living room. The name Kwame Jeffries flashed on the screen. My heart skipped a beat. Kwame didn't call me just to chat. He was the general manager of the Royal Palm Hotel, the best in his field, a man of impeccable composure. 10 years ago, I had pulled him out of a case stitched together with white threads by corrupt investigators. He was innocent, and I proved it, risking my own career. Since then, he sent me cards for Christmas and Juneteenth, but he never called on a Saturday afternoon. I pressed the answer button. "I'm listening, Kwame." "Bernadine? Mrs. Vance?" His voice sounded strange, tight. It lacked its usual velvety confidence. "Forgive me for bothering you on the weekend. I know this is a violation of all privacy protocols, but my conscience won't let me stay silent. You've done a lot for me. I can't do otherwise." I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, a familiar feeling, the harbinger of trouble. The prosecutor's instinct woke up instantly, pushing the fatigue into the background. "Speak, Kwame, clearly and to the point." "Your husband, Reginald Vance. He is here, at the Royal Palm." I involuntarily chuckled, looking out the window at the overgrown garden. "Absurd. Kwame, you're mistaken. Reginald is fishing with my son. They left for the lake this morning. It must be someone who looks like him." "Bernadine," he interrupted, and in that boldness there was so much anxiety that I fell silent. "He checked into the presidential suite half an hour ago. The registration was made under your passport, or rather, using your passport data." I froze. The room became very quiet. Only the ticking of the old wall clock marked the seconds. "What do you mean, under my passport? I'm here, Kwame, and my ID is in my purse." "He's not alone," Kwame continued, ignoring my objection. "There's a woman with him, young. At first I thought... Forgive me. I thought it was you when I saw them from the back in the lobby. She's wearing your coat, that camel-colored cashmere one you wore to the mayor's gala last year, and she carries herself... She's copying your walk." The world tilted. The camel coat was hanging in the closet at our city apartment. Only I, Reginald, and Kendrick had keys to that apartment. This is some kind of joke. My voice turned icy. Reginald decided to throw a masquerade party? "If only," Kwame exhaled. "Bernadine, this isn't just an affair. 10 minutes ago, Kendrick called my personal number." "Kendrick? My son is there too?" "He's waiting in the parking deck. He called and offered me money, a very large sum, to turn off the surveillance cameras on the 4th floor and wipe the recordings for the last hour. He said, 'The old lady won't find out anyway. She's at the country house messing with the kids, and we need to sign some papers without witnesses.'" At that moment, I heard something crash in the kitchen. It sounded like the grandsons had reached the cookie jar, but I didn't move. Inside me, where a second ago there had been fatigue and domestic irritation, an icy void was now expanding. Fishing. Male bonding. They hadn't just lied to me. They had used me as a babysitter to free up their time. But for what? Why would a woman wear my coat? Why register under my name? And why would Kendrick, my boy whom I had always protected from his own mistakes, need to disable cameras? "Bernadine." Kwame's voice became firmer. "You need to come immediately. What is happening in that suite isn't a romantic rendezvous. I see them on the monitors. You have to see this." I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror. Gray hair pulled back in a messy bun. A house dress, face without makeup. Just a regular grandmother. An old workhorse, as Reginald liked to joke when he thought I couldn't hear. I straightened my spine. The fatigue vanished. Its place was taken by a cold, calculating rage. "Kwame," I said quietly, "don't turn anything off, and under no circumstances let them know you called me. I'm on my way." I hung up. The preserves in the kitchen seemed to be starting to burn, but it didn't matter anymore. My family had started a game, the rules of which they did not understand. They forgot who I was. They thought they were deceiving a retiree, but they had awakened the district attorney. I turned off the gas under the pot of preserves with one sharp movement. The sweet, cloying foam had already begun to settle, leaving burnt marks on the edges, a metaphor for my family life, which I seemed to have kept on the fire too long. 5 minutes later, I was pounding on the door of Miss Hattie, our neighbor. "Emergency in the city," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Issues with paperwork from the old job. The boys have eaten, but they need eyes on them. Can you help me out?" Miss Hattie, a kind soul, just nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Of course, Bernie, don't worry. Go on." I wasn't worried. I was turning to stone. The drive to the city took 40 minutes, though usually I spent an hour. I drove the way I hadn't driven in years, aggressively, cutting corners, ignoring the pitiful screech of tires on the turns. My old, reliable SUV, which Reginald had long urged me to sell for something more status-appropriate, roared, sensing its owner's mood. Kwame's phrase played in my head like a broken record. "She's in your coat." I didn't cry. Tears are for those who surrender or for those hoping for sympathy. I was driving to a crime scene, and at a crime scene, an investigator needs a clear head and dry eyes. The Royal Palm met me with its majestic facade, shining in the rays of the setting sun. But I drove past the main entrance with its liveried doormen. I turned into the narrow alley leading to the service gates. There, by the loading dock, which smelled of fresh laundry and expensive tobacco, Kwame was waiting for me. He looked aged since our last conversation, dark circles under his eyes, a tense line to his mouth. Seeing me, he stepped forward but didn't offer his hand. He understood that now was not the time for social gestures. "Mrs. Vance," he said quietly, opening the heavy metal door for me. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Lead the way," I said briefly. We walked through a labyrinth of service corridors, past housekeepers with carts who shrank fearfully against the walls at the sight of the manager, and cooks carrying trays of canapes. My sneakers moved silently on the concrete floor. I felt like a ghost in my own life, a life that another woman was currently wearing 3 floors up. The security room was plunged into semi-darkness. A wall was occupied by a mosaic of dozens of monitors flickering with cold light. The air hummed with cooling fans and the smell of stale coffee. Kwame gestured for the young security guard to leave. "We are alone. Camera 402, Kwame said, pointing to the central screen. The image was crisp, high definition, the pride of the security system I had once recommended the hotel owners install. The presidential suite, a spacious living room with antique furniture, heavy burgundy drapes. In the middle of the room, Reginald was pacing nervously. He held a glass of whiskey in his hand. I recognized that gesture, the way he swirled the ice before taking a sip. He was pale, his shoulders slumped, his jacket thrown onto an armchair. He didn't look like a happy lover, but like a man awaiting execution. And then she walked into the frame. My breath caught. It wasn't just a resemblance. It was a terrifying theatrical mirror. The woman was about my height, maybe a little fuller, but the cut of my camel coat, which she hadn't even taken off inside the room, hid that. On her head was a wig, artfully styled gray hair, exactly my hairstyle, the severe bun I've worn for 30 years. She walked to the table and leaned over. The light caught her chest, and I saw a flash of green fire. My brooch, an emerald set in antique gold, a family heirloom, my mother's gift for my law school graduation, a brooch that should have been lying in a velvet box in the safe of our bedroom. Reginald knew the code. Of course, he knew the code. I felt my fingernails digging into my palms until it hurt. He hadn't just stolen jewelry, he was stealing my identity. The woman sat at the table. Before her lay a tablet and a stack of papers. She picked up a stylus. Her movements were uncertain, jerky. She wrote something, erased it, wrote again. "What is she doing?" My voice sounded hoarse. "Alien." "Practicing," Kwame answered, not looking at me. He placed his hand on the audio control panel. "Ready? This is the hardest part." I nodded. Kwame turned the dial. The static in the speakers was replaced by voices. The quality was perfect, as if I were standing right next to them. "No, not like that," Reginald said irritably on the screen. His voice trembled with tension. "Tanisha, you're putting the loop too early. Bernadine's signature is sharp. At the end, there's always a hard slash down like a whip crack. Try again." The woman, Tanisha, sighed. Her voice was younger than mine, rougher, with a slight accent she was diligently trying to hide. "Reginald, baby, I've been writing for an hour. My hand is tired. Maybe that's enough?" "Right," he barked, and I flinched. I had never heard him yell at strangers like that. At home, he always played the role of the soft, agreeable intellectual. "Thorne will be here in 20 minutes. Everything must be perfect. Give me the text." With intonation. Tanisha straightened up, adjusted the collar of my coat, and looking at an invisible point in front of her, began to speak. And with her words, the floor disappeared beneath my feet. "I, Bernadine Olivia Vance," she began, trying to mimic my timbre, my pauses, "being of sound mind and memory, hereby transfer all property rights to the Vance estate, as well as general power of attorney over all my bank accounts, to my son, Kendrick Reginald Vance." She paused, peeking at a cheat sheet. "Effective immediately. Due to my..." She stumbled. "Due to my deteriorating health condition and inability to adequately assess financial risks." A deathly silence hung in the security room. I stared at the screen, at this dressed-up doll in my clothes, and realized that before me was not a scene of marital infidelity. This was my funeral, a living funeral. Deteriorating health condition, inability to assess. They didn't just want to take the money, they wanted to declare me incompetent, a crazy old woman who had lost her mind and needed guardianship. My husband, my son, the people for whom I lived, breathed, worked. I felt something hot rising to my throat, but I swallowed the lump. Rage, pure and distilled, displaced the pain. I remembered everything. Every sleepless night I bailed Kendrick out of trouble. Every pill I handed to Reginald. Every dollar I saved, denying myself a vacation. "They aren't cheating on me, Kwame," I whispered, not taking my eyes off the screen. "They are erasing me." I shifted my gaze to the manager. There was horror in his eyes. He expected me to break, to scream, to cry, to faint. Instead, I unbuttoned my cardigan, feeling the familiar cold calm of the courtroom return. "Kwame," my voice became hard as steel. "I need the guest list. Who else is registered in connection with this room, besides Kendrick, who is waiting outside?" Kwame quickly tapped on the keyboard. "There is a guest pass for an Elias Thorne." The name hit me like an electric shock. The puzzle snapped together instantly. Thorne, the dirty lawyer, a slippery type who specialized in complex inheritance cases. 10 years ago, he had evaded responsibility because a key witness disappeared. "Thorne," I repeated, and a smile appeared on my lips that made Kwame involuntarily recoil. "Excellent. Simply excellent." I took my phone out of my purse. My hands were no longer shaking. "Mrs. Vance, what are you going to do?" Kwame asked. "Call the police?" "The police will come, Kwame, but later." I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. "First, we're going to arrange a confrontation. Only I will be the judge." "This is Vance," I said into the phone, eyes glued to the monitor. "Hello, Deshawn." Silence hung on the other end, interrupted only by the rustling of papers. Deshawn, the head of the IT and Archives department, a man who was afraid of his own shadow, would recognize my voice even from the grave. And on the screen at that moment, a scene was playing out that made bile rise in my throat. Reginald, having drained his glass in one gulp, put his phone on speaker. Kwame immediately piped the sound into our room. "Kendrick!" My husband's voice broke into a squeal. "Where the hell are you? This actress is already losing it. We can't wait forever." From the speakers came the velvety, lazy laugh of my son, the same laugh he used 3 months ago to beg me for money to pay off yet another loan. "Pop, relax." Kendrick's voice sounded smug. Background street noise hummed. "Thorne and I are already parking. Don't stress, we have a wagon load of time." "A wagon load?" Tanisha intervened capriciously. She sat at the table, tugging at the edge of the wig, which was apparently starting to chafe. "What if your mother calls or, God forbid, decides to come back to the city?" Kendrick laughed louder. "Tanisha, baby, you overestimate my mother. She's at the lake house passed out. The grandkids sucked all the juice out of her before lunch. She's probably already asleep in the armchair in front of the TV with her mouth open." He paused, and I heard the sound of a lighter. "She's like an old plow mule. She works and works until she drops. It wouldn't occur to her to check where we are. She's too simple for that, too trusting." Plow mule, simple. These words hit me harder than the sight of another woman in my coat. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving a cold, ringing clarity. So that's how they see my care, my entire life laid down for their comfort. Not as love, but as the stupidity of a draft animal that can be used and then sent to the slaughterhouse. "Bernadine, Mrs. Vance?" The voice in my phone receiver trembled. Deshawn had finally found his speech. "My God, how many years? Has something happened?" "Something happened, Deshawn," I replied in an icy tone, watching Reginald pour Tanisha champagne from the minibar. They clinked glasses. To success, to stupid wives. "I need your help, urgently, right now." "It's Saturday, Bernie. Archives are closed. You have remote access to the server." "Don't lie to me," I interrupted. "I need the old file." 2014. Elias Thorne. The pause on the line hung again, this time heavy. Thorne, whispered the archivist. Bernie, you know that case was sealed. It's marked destroyed due to expiration. The brass gave the order to forget it. I remember who gave the order, Deshawn, and I remember that you are a man who keeps backups. You kept the scans of the interrogations that accidentally disappeared from the folder before the trial. You told me then, just in case, Mrs. Vance, suddenly the wind changes. The wind has changed. I saw on the adjacent monitor a black sedan pulling up to the hotel entrance. Kendrick stepped out, adjusting a jacket bought with my money. Following him, wheezing, emerged a heavy-set white man with a leather briefcase. Elias Thorne. He had aged, expanded in width, but I would recognize that shifting, predatory gaze out of 1,000. Bernie, if anyone finds out I accessed the Black Archive, I'll be fired without severance. If you don't send me the file right now, Deshawn, I will remind the Attorney General exactly who was on duty in the archives the night the originals went missing, and then firing will be your smallest problem. I wasn't bluffing. There was no threat in my voice, only a statement of fact. This was my element. Not the kitchen with preserves, not the garden beds, but this hard, ruthless bargaining where the currency is other people's sins. Deshawn sighed heavily. I could hear keys clacking. What exactly do you need? The fraud case involving the estate of Senator Jenkins' widow. I need the maid's testimony. The one where she claims the widow was under psychotropic drugs when she signed the deed. And the independent expert's conclusion on the forged handwriting that Thorne didn't notice. Give me 2 minutes, he surrendered, sending to your encrypted messenger. But Bernie, be careful. Thorne is a man with connections now. People with connections have bones that break just as loudly as everyone else's, I replied. I hung up. On the screen, Kendrick and Thorne were already entering the elevator. They were smiling. Thorne was telling my son something, gesturing actively with his free hand, and Kendrick was nodding obsequiously. They were rising to the 4th floor, straight into the set trap. Kwame looked at me. In the dim light of the security room, his face seemed pale. Did you know they would invite him specifically? He asked quietly. I hoped. I gripped the phone until my knuckles turned white. Criminals rarely change proven methods. They are lazy, Kwame, just as lazy as my husband. The phone in my hand vibrated briefly. A message from Deshawn, file downloaded. I opened the document, dense text, scans of yellowed pages, stamps. Here it was. The weapon I sought 10 years ago was now in my pocket. Thorne thought he was going to process easy prey from a simple old woman. He didn't know he was walking into his own trial. They are approaching the door, Kwame said, looking at the corridor monitor. Excellent. I took a deep breath. I felt a cold calm spreading inside before the battle. Let them enter. Let them relax. Let Thorne lay out his papers. Let them taste victory. And then we slam the lid. The door to room 402 swung open, and my son appeared on the monitor screen. He walked in with a master's gait, arms spread wide as if he intended to embrace the whole room, or rather, everything this room symbolized. My fortune, my real estate, my freedom. Following him, shuffling in short steps and clutching a plump leather briefcase to his chest, crawled Elias Thorne. Well, where is our star? Kendrick asked loudly, scanning the living room. I hope the makeup is ready. We're short on time. Elias here charges by the hour, and it's higher than the girls from the escort service. Forgive the comparison, Thorne giggled nastily, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. Time is money, Kendrick, especially when it comes to such delicate transactions. I watched them, sitting in the chair in the security room, and felt the last warmth dying inside me. You know, they say a mother's love is unconditional, that it can survive anything. I thought so, too. I thought so when I bailed out his first business. I thought so when I paid the lawyers after that DUI. But right now, watching my son pull a professional video camera and tripod out of a bag, I realized love is mortal. It can be killed. And my son had just delivered the final, fatal blow. Why the camera? Reginald asked, nervously fingering a button on his shirt. He clearly felt uncomfortable in the notary's presence. "For insurance, Pop." Kendrick busily set up the tripod opposite the desk. "Thorne will certify the signature. That goes without saying. But when, Mother realizes and tries to challenge the deal in court, claiming she didn't sign or was incompetent, we'll release the video." He walked over to Tanisha, who was sitting at the table in my coat, and roughly turned her head so her face was in the shadow of the floor lamp. Like that. The light falls from behind. You can see the silhouette, see the coat, see the gray hair, see that damn brooch, but you can't make out the face. Perfect. "Genius," purred Thorne, laying out papers on the table. Official letterheads, deed of gift, general power of attorney, declaration of voluntary relinquishment of capacity in favor of a guardian. The judge will see a familiar silhouette, your signature style, hear your voice. No expertise will dig underneath it. This is called an ironclad alibi of presence. I watched this performance and felt a strange detachment. It was as if I were back at work behind the glass of an interrogation room watching seasoned criminals. Emotions shut down. Only facts remained. Corpus delicti, fraud on a particularly large scale, conspiracy, forgery of documents. My husband, my son. They didn't just want to steal the money. They wanted to expose me to the whole world, to my colleagues and friends, as a mad old woman who gave everything away and forgot about it. "Kwame." My voice was quiet, but in the small room, it sounded like an order. "Turn off the AC in 402. The manager sitting next to me flinched and turned to me. "Excuse me?" "Turn off the climate control system in the suite and cut off the ventilation." Kwame hesitated for a second, but seeing my face, he nodded and quickly typed on his terminal keyboard. "Done. System halted." The Royal Palm, an old hotel. The walls here are thick. The windows in the suite don't open for safety and noise insulation. And the heavy velvet drapes, which were now tightly drawn by Kendrick's order, created a thermos effect. Without a flow of fresh air, with 3 people and running equipment, the temperature in the room would start climbing very fast. On the screen, I saw Thorne begin the preparation. "All right, Tanisha, darling," the lawyer tapped a finger on the paper. "First here, full signature, slowly, confidently." "Kendrick, is the camera rolling?" "Rolling," replied the son, looking into the viewfinder. "Action!" commanded Thorne. Tanisha picked up the pen. I saw her back tense under the fabric of my coat. She was hot. A synthetic wig, a wool blend coat in a closed room. In a couple of minutes, she would be unbearable. But I needed not just to make them sweat. I needed to sow panic, disrupt the self-satisfied rhythm, make the rats run around the cage. I took out my smartphone. In my time as DA, I dealt with the cybercrimes division. I knew how notification systems worked, and I still had a few specific apps our experts used for testing security systems, or let's be frank, for creating controlled provocations. I opened a spoofing app. In the From field, I typed DOJ Financial Crimes. I formulated the text message quickly, legally precise, terrifying. "Attention! Unauthorized liquidation of assets detected on Vance Group accounts. Red code algorithm triggered. Biometric confirmation of owner identity required immediately. Financial monitoring. Task force dispatched to location." I selected Reginald's number in the contact list. My finger hovered over the send button. On the screen, Thorne was handing Tanisha the second sheet. "Excellent. Now the power of attorney for the accounts." I pressed the button. 1 second, 2. In the suite, on the table next to the bottle of champagne, Reginald's phone beeped piercingly. It was an unusual ringtone, a harsh, alarming signal I had set for him for emergency alerts a year ago. Reginald jumped, nearly knocking over his glass. "Who is that now?" Kendrick threw out irritably, not looking up from the camera. "Pop, silence that thing. We're recording audio." Reginald reached for the phone with a trembling hand. He brought the screen to his eyes, squinting. I saw the color instantly drain from his face, turning it gray like cigarette ash. "Kendrick!" he wheezed. Kendrick, stop! Wait! What is it? The son impatiently waved his hand. Tanisha, keep going. Don't stop. Stop! Reginald screamed so loud that Tanisha dropped the pen. He jumped up, knocking over his chair. In the stuffy room, where the air was already becoming heavy and stale, his panic was almost tangible. Read this! He shoved the phone under his son's nose. Department of Justice. They're writing about a red code. A task force has been dispatched. Kendrick snatched the phone. I saw his eyes darting, reading the lines. Thorne, sensing something was wrong, stopped smiling and craned his neck, trying to peek at the screen. What task force? The lawyer squealed, his voice cracking. Kendrick, you said the accounts were clean. You said the old lady didn't put any blocks on them. I don't know. Kendrick looked bewildered. Sweat broke out on his temples. The heat in the room was starting to act in unison with the fear. Maybe it's spam, a mistake? What the hell kind of mistake? Roared Reginald. It says biometric confirmation. They know it's not her. Calm down, barked Kendrick, though his own hands were shaking. Thorne, what does this mean? Thorne was no longer looking at the papers. He was looking at the door. He began frantically gathering documents back into his briefcase. It means, gentlemen, that the financial monitoring system triggered on large transactions. If the feds are coming, I'm not part of this. I warned you. Sit down. Kendrick shoved the lawyer back into the chair. Nobody is going anywhere. We haven't transferred anything yet. We're only signing papers. It's hot, groaned Tanisha, pulling at the wig. Underneath, her hair was wet with sweat. I can't breathe in here. Why is it so hot? I can't work like this. My mascara is running. Put the wig back on, you fool, screamed Reginald at her. We could be raided any minute. Chaos. I watched them and felt a cold satisfaction. They were scurrying around the luxurious suite like roaches when the kitchen light is suddenly turned on. The air conditioner was silent. The air grew thicker. Fear mixed with humidity stripped them of the ability to think logically. They didn't think to check the number the text came from. They didn't think to call the bank. Their conscience was so unclean that they believed in punishment instantly. Kwame, I said, rising from the chair. Prepare the cart. The manager looked at me with awe. You're going in there? Yes. I adjusted my blazer. They are expecting a task force. They'll get one. Only instead of SWAT, someone scarier is coming to them. Who? He asked automatically. I smiled, but my eyes remained icy. A scorned wife. I took a seat in the massive leather chair in the manager's office. It was cool here, smelling of expensive wood polish and that sterile silence that only exists in centers of decision-making. Before me stood a tablet, its camera aimed directly at my face. On the adjacent monitor, I saw what was happening a floor above, in the stifling hell of room 402. They were rushing. The fear sown by my DOJ message forced them to cast aside caution. Sign faster, damn you, hissed Kendrick, wiping a wet forehead with his shirt sleeve. Thorne, where is the seal? Stamp it as soon as she finishes the slash. Tanisha, my pathetic copy, sat hunched over the table. The wig had slid to the side, revealing a strip of her own dark hair, but no one noticed. Sweat flowed down her neck, soaking into the collar of my favorite cashmere coat. It hurt to see this. Not because of the coat, of course, but because of how cheaply they priced my life, turning it into this sweaty, fussy circus. My hand is shaking, she whined. I can't make the V. My fingers are slipping. Screw the V, roared Reginald. He paced the room, constantly glancing at his phone, expecting a call from mythical federal agents. If it looks similar, fine. The main thing is to notarize it. At that moment, there was a knock on the door of the suite. The sound wasn't loud, polite, but in the tense silence, it sounded like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Reginald pressed himself into the back of the sofa. Thorne clutched the briefcase to his stomach like a shield. Kendrick froze with his hand raised. Who is it? My son asked hoarsely. From the hallway came Kwame's calm, velvet voice. "Room service, a compliment from the establishment for our special guests." Kendrick exhaled, and his shoulders dropped. "It's just service, Pop. Calm down." He stepped toward the door. "We don't need anything. Leave it at the threshold. We're busy." "I beg your pardon," Kwame answered persistently, but softly through the door. "This is a personal order from the owner. Cristal champagne and ice. Given the temperature in the room, I think you need this." The word ice acted magically. In the stifling heat I had arranged for them, thirst was stronger than fear. Kendrick, cursing, unlocked the lock and opened the door slightly. Kwame entered smoothly, pushing a serving cart covered with a snowy white tablecloth before him. On it towered a silver dish covered by a huge dome, a cloche. The shine of the metal was blinding in the semi-darkness of the room. "Faster!" Kendrick snapped, blocking Kwame from going further into the living room. "Leave it and get out. We are busy." "Of course." Kwame stopped the cart right in the center of the room, opposite the table where Tanisha sat, and the sofa where Reginald shook. "Just allow me to present," the chef insisted. In my office, I pressed the broadcast button. The green light of the camera on my tablet lit up. On the monitor screen, I saw Kwame grasp the handle of the silver dome with the theatrical grace of a magician. Thorne craned his neck, expecting to see caviar or fruit. Reginald licked his lips greedily. Kwame lifted the lid with a sharp movement. Underneath, there was no ice, no champagne, no appetizers. On the white napkin stood a black tablet on a stand. Its screen flared to life, and in the gloom of the suite, my face appeared. Close up, calm, without a shadow of a smile, with that very expression my subordinates in the DA's office called the Medusa stare. Silence hung in the room, denser and heavier than the humidity. It rang in the ears. I held the pause, gave them a second to realize, gave them time for their brains to try to find a rational explanation and fail. "That slash looks a little uncertain, darling," I said into the microphone. My voice, amplified by the tablet speakers, filled room 402, bouncing off the walls. It sounded everywhere. "Perhaps you should let the actual owner of the hand give it a try." The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Kendrick staggered as if he'd taken a physical blow to the chest. Blood drained from his face so rapidly his skin turned the color of that starched tablecloth on the cart. He opened his mouth, but made no sound, just a pathetic wheeze. Reginald, my husband with whom I had lived for 40 years, dropped the glass of whiskey. Heavy crystal hit the parquet but didn't break. It rolled across the floor with a dull thud, splashing amber liquid. He looked at the tablet screen with animal terror, not with remorse, but with the terror of a trapped beast. Tanisha shrieked, threw down the pen, and jumped up from the chair, knocking it over. She backed away to the wall, covering her face with her hands, as if my voice could hit her. Thorne woke up first. The rat's instinct for self-preservation worked faster than human shock. "Set up!" he squealed, grabbing his briefcase. "This is entrapment! I have nothing to do with this! I'm just a consultant!" He lunged for the door, shoving past the frozen Kendrick. His eyes darted. He already saw himself free, in the corridor, running down the stairs, away from this cursed hotel. He grabbed the door handle and yanked it down with force. The door didn't budge. Thorne yanked again, putting his whole body weight into it. Nothing. I, sitting in the office, placed my finger on the touch panel controlling the hotel's security system. The lock icon on room 402 glowed red. Perimeter, lockdown active. "Don't bother, Mr. Thorne," I said, watching him panic and pound his fist on the wood. "The electronic locks at the Royal Palm are Swiss. They are more reliable than your professional ethics." The click of the lock sounded like the final bang of a judge's gavel. The mousetrap had slammed shut, and we remained in it, me as the observer and they as my prisoners. Only now, the walls of this cell weren't closing in around me. I took the master key from Kwame's desk without saying a word. His fingers uncurled, releasing the white plastic as if it were a detonator. Don't turn off the recording. I threw over my shoulder, walking out of the cool office into the corridor. The path to the elevator took 40 seconds. The ride to the 4th floor, another 30. I counted to myself, synchronizing my breathing with the rhythm of my steps. It was an old habit before entering the courtroom. Leave everything superfluous outside the door. Turn into a function, into the law-made flesh. The 4th floor corridor met me with silence. Thick carpeting muffled the sounds of my steps, but I felt the air here was electrified with fear leaking from under the door of room 402. I tapped the card to the lock. The diode blinked green, and the mechanism clicked, granting access. I pushed the door and walked in. The first thing that hit me was the smell. A mix of expensive perfume, spilled alcohol, and the sharp, sour scent of human sweat that always accompanies panic. It was stifling in the suite, like a sauna. The heavy burgundy curtains were tightly drawn, cutting off the world outside. A silent tableau froze in the room. Kendrick stood by the wall, breathing heavily. Red splotches covered his face. Reginald sat on the sofa, clutching his head in his hands, rocking from side to side. Tanisha, huddled in a ball in the corner, looked at me with wide eyes that held nothing but the desire to disappear. I didn't look at my husband. I didn't dignify my son with a glance. For me, they didn't exist right now. My focus was on one target, the professional who should have known better. I walked across the room straight to Elias Thorne. My heels clicked on the parquet inset of the floor rhythmically and hard, like metronome beats. The lawyer backed away, his hips bumping into the writing desk. He clutched the briefcase to his chest like a life preserver. But seeing my eyes, he understood. He was drowning. "Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice breaking into falsetto. This is a misunderstanding. I was misled. I assumed." I stopped a step away from him, took out my phone, unlocked the screen, and shoved it under his nose, brightness cranked to maximum. "Read, Elias," I said quietly. "Case number 48B, 2014, interrogation protocol of witness Betty S., the very maid whose testimony you so conveniently lost before the inventory of the senator's widow's estate." Thorne turned white. Sweat drops on his forehead merged into streams. He recognized this document. He knew this ghost was buried deep, and the fact that I held it in my hands here and now meant the end for him. "I have the original scans, Elias, and a motion to reopen proceedings based on newly discovered circumstances is already sitting in the drafts on the DA server. I just need to press one button." He shifted his gaze from the phone to me, then to the closed door, then back to the phone. His lips trembled. "Bernadine, I have a family. I have a license. If you walk out of here with those papers," I nodded at the table where the deed and power of attorney lay, "you won't just lose your license, you'll sit for about 8 years for fraud as part of an organized group." Thorne twitched as if shocked. He threw the briefcase aside, grabbed the stack of documents from the table that he had been preparing for signature just a minute ago, and with agility unexpected for his build, ripped them in half. The paper yielded with a crackle. He tore them again and again, turning official sheets into meaningless confetti that fell to the floor like dirty snow. "No papers!" he screamed, throwing the scraps toward Kendrick. "Nothing exists! I didn't notarize anything! I'm not participating!" He jabbed a trembling finger at my son. "It's him! It's all him! Kendrick Vance hired me! He said his mother agreed but couldn't come. He offered triple the rate for the call-out. I am a victim of deception." The silence following his scream was broken by Kendrick's heavy, rasping breath. My son peeled himself off the wall. He looked at the pile of torn paper on the floor, and I saw fear in his eyes replaced by something darker, uglier, pure, unclouded hatred. The mask of the loving son he had worn for years cracked and crumbled. "You," he hissed, looking at me. "You ruined everything." "Like always, I ruined it?" I asked calmly. "I stopped you from stealing my house?" "Your house!" Kendrick yelled, veins bulging on his neck. "Why do you need it? You're sitting on this money like a dog in the manger. You have millions in assets, and you're boiling preserves at the lake and driving an old Jeep. You just rot over the gold while I try to build a life." He took a step toward me. Reginald shrank deeper into the sofa, afraid to intervene. "I needed that money, Mama." Kendrick spat the last word like a curse. "To save the business, to get out of the hole. You wouldn't have even noticed half the accounts missing. You don't even check the balance. I wanted to save us all, and you selfish." I stepped toward him. He was a head taller than me, but looking into his face twisted with malice right now, I didn't see a grown man, but a naughty boy who broke a window and blames the ball. My hand flew up, a short, sharp movement. The sound of the slap was dry and whipping. It wasn't a blow of despair, not the hysterical gesture of an offended woman. It was a blow that puts a period at the end of a sentence, a verdict blow. Kendrick's head jerked to the side. A red mark instantly began to bloom on his cheek. He froze, gasping for air in shock. The silence returned, but now it was different, ringing with tension. "What business, Kendrick?" I asked. My voice was quiet, but every word fell into the silence like a stone. "Are you talking about that shell company, Vector M, you registered 6 months ago?" He slowly turned his face to me. In his eyes flashed real terror, not the kind at the sight of police, but the deep fear of a man whose darkest secret is exposed. "You thought I didn't know?" I continued, not taking my eyes off him. "You thought a former district attorney wouldn't see a classic money laundering scheme? You weren't building a business, son. You turned into a laundromat." I paused, savoring how his world was collapsing. "You gambled it away, Kendrick, and not at poker with friends. You owe the volatile syndicates in Atlanta, and they put you on the clock. You used my accounts to wash dirty money, hoping to cover your debts with the interest." Reginald on the sofa let out a strangled groan. Thorne froze with his mouth open. "You aren't just a thief, Kendrick," I finished, looking at the person I once carried in my arms. "You are an accomplice to organized crime, and today your partners will find out the laundromat is closed. Permanently." The silence that followed my words about the syndicates was dense, almost tangible like cotton wool. Kendrick stood pressed against the wall, his face gray and lifeless. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew I knew names, dates, and sums. He was crushed not by the fact that his mother caught him stealing, but by the fact that his grandiose game of big businessman turned out to be a transparent cheap trick. And then Reginald stirred. My husband, who for the last 20 minutes had sat on the sofa looking like a pile of rags, suddenly straightened up. The instinct for self-preservation, the only thing he was truly talented at, kicked in at full power. He realized Kendrick was a sinking ship and decided it was time to transfer back to the familiar, reliable barge, to me. He stood up, his eyes filled with tears, instantly, abundantly, with an ease any professional mourner would envy. "Bernie," his voice trembled, breaking into a pitiful whisper. "Bernie, listen. My God, what have we done?" He stepped toward me, stepping over the scraps of the torn deed lying on the floor. He walked toward me like a beaten dog, tail tucked, but looking up with hope. "It's all him." Reginald pointed a finger toward Kendrick, not even looking at his son. "He forced me, I swear to you. He said he had debts, that they would kill him. Bernie, you know I'm a weak man. I got scared for the boy. I didn't want to. I thought we would just sign, and then I would have told you everything." He came up close. I smelled his sweat mixed with whiskey fumes, and his habitual cologne with notes of sandalwood, the scent I had inhaled every morning for 40 years. Reginald put his hands on my shoulders, heavy, warm palms, the same hands that once put a ring on my finger, the same hands that held our children in the maternity ward. "Bernie, please." He looked into my eyes, and a tear rolled down his cheek. "We are family. We've lived together all our lives. Don't destroy us. Don't give him to the police. He's our son. Think of the grandkids. How will they grow up knowing their father is in prison and their grandfather is disgraced? We'll leave. We'll forget everything. I will do whatever you say. Just don't ruin—" For a second, just for one short, treacherous second, time stopped. I felt the familiar weight of his hands. It was the weight of habit, the weight of duty. All my life, I had been the pillar they leaned on when the earth fell out from under their feet. Mama will solve it. Bernadine will sort it out. Bernie will understand. His eyes begged for forgiveness. And a part of me, that old part that for years learned to endure, smooth corners, and sacrifice myself for peace in the family, wavered. Indeed, how would I explain to the grandkids? How would I live alone in an empty house? Maybe just take the documents, scare them, and let them go. Pretend nothing happened, just to preserve the illusion of a normal life. The room was so quiet, I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Reginald felt my hesitation. His grip on my shoulders became firmer, more confident. He already saw victory. He knew this button in me, the sacrificial mother button, and he pressed it with all his might. I took a deep breath. The air in the suite was stale, poisoned with lies. And then I looked over his shoulder into the corner of the room. There, pressed against the wall, sat Tanisha. A strange woman in my coat. On her chest, dull in the gloom, hung my mother's emerald brooch, an item Mama wore during the hard times of segregation, an item she bequeathed to me with a request to protect our family's dignity. Right now, that brooch was on the chest of a hired actress whom my men hired to declare me insane. Something clicked inside me, not loud like a gunshot, but quiet, like a light bulb burning out. The last thread connecting me to these people snapped. Pity vanished. Only disgust remained. I slowly raised my hands and took Reginald by the wrists. His skin was damp and sticky. I removed his palms from my shoulders. Not with a jerk, but carefully, yet with such irresistible force as one removes dirty laundry from oneself. Bernie? He blinked, not understanding. I let go of his hands, and they fell limply to his sides. I took a step back, creating distance. Sanitary distance. "Don't touch me," I said. Quietly, calmly. Reginald froze. The expression of hope on his face began to change to fear. I turned away from him. I no longer looked at my husband or son. I looked at the actress. "You," I said, looking her straight in the eye. Tanisha flinched, pressing into the wallpaper. I didn't know anything. I thought it was a prank," she babbled. "Shut up," I cut her off. "You have a choice, honey. A very simple choice. In 5 minutes, the police will be here. You can go down as an accomplice in an organized group. That's 3 to 7 years in general population. You won't need the coat there. They hand out jumpsuits." She sobbed, covering her mouth with her hand. "Or," I continued, pointing to the table where the remains of the paper and the pen she dropped lay. "You take a clean sheet right now and write a detailed witness statement about who hired you, about exactly what you were asked to do, about how they rehearsed forging the signature, about the fact that Notary Thorne was here." Tanisha nodded so fast, the wig slid sideways again. "I'll write it. I'll write everything. I'll be a witness. I swear." "Write," I ordered. "Name, last name, date, and don't miss a single detail." She rushed to the table, pushing the air with her elbows, grabbed a sheet of paper that miraculously survived Thorne's tantrum, and began to scribble, breaking the pen tip. "Bernie," Reginald called again behind my back. Now there was panic in his voice. "Why does she need to write? We agreed. We are family." I slowly turned to him. At that moment, I felt taller, stronger, more monumental than ever in my life. I wasn't just a wife, I was Lady Justice, and the blindfold had finally fallen from my eyes. "We aren't family, Reginald," I said. "Family are people who protect each other. You are parasites, and I am an organism that has finally decided to heal itself." "You can't do this," he squealed, losing the mask. "I have nothing. All the accounts are in your name. The house is yours. You can't throw me out on the street at 65. I'm your husband. By law, half of everything is mine." I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a prosecutor, pulling the ace of spades from a folder kept for the finale. "By law?" I asked. How good that you remembered the law, darling. I walked up close to him, forcing him to recoil. You probably forgot, or never read carefully, but when we got married 35 years ago, my father insisted on a prenup. You laughed then and signed without looking because I had nothing but my parents' apartment and ambition. Reginald looked at me with glassy eyes. He really didn't remember or hadn't attached importance to it. In that contract there is Clause 4.2, the so-called bad faith clause. I enunciated every word. If one spouse commits intentional acts aimed at causing financial harm to the other spouse or participates in a conspiracy to fraudulently alienate assets. I paused, enjoying the effect. The joint property regime is annulled completely. The guilty party forfeits the right to any share in assets acquired during the marriage. The silence in the room became dead. Kendrick stopped breathing. Tanisha stopped writing. Even Thorne, huddled in the corner, raised his head. You committed a felony against me, Reginald, I said softly, almost affectionately. You tried to steal my name and my life. Tanisha's witness testimony and video footage from the hotel cameras will prove the fact of conspiracy. Clause 4.2 is activated. Reginald opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything. He slumped onto the sofa, as if the air had been let out of him. I'm not just divorcing you, I finished, looking at the man who had become a stranger to me in an instant. I am evicting you. You leave here not with half my fortune. You leave with what you came into this room with, your suitcases and your son's debts. You leave with nothing. I turned around and walked to the exit, leaving behind the ruins of their greed. Kwame, I said loudly into the empty corridor, knowing he was listening. Call the police. The witness is ready. The police arrived quietly. The Royal Palm is a hotel that values its reputation even during catastrophes, so there were no wailing sirens or flashing lights slicing through the night darkness. Just 2 strict, unmarked cars at the service entrance and 4 officers who came up the freight elevator. Kwame worked flawlessly. When the elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, the corridor was empty. No curious eyes, no maids with phones, just me, standing by the window at the end of the hall and the door to room 402, behind which my past life had collapsed. Kendrick was brought out first. My son, who an hour ago fancied himself a financial genius and arbiter of destinies, now looked like a deflated balloon. Metal shone on his wrists. He didn't resist, but he didn't lift his head either. Passing me, he slowed his step for a second. I expected him to say something, a curse, a plea, anything, but he just hunched over more and looked away. Shame? No. Rather the realization that the syndicate in Atlanta wouldn't be able to reach him in a holding cell. In some twisted sense, by putting him in jail, I saved his life. But he would never understand that. Next, they led Thorne. The lawyer tried to maintain remnants of dignity, loudly citing articles of the Criminal Procedure Code to the officer holding him by the elbow. This is arbitrary. I will complain to the Bar Association. My client misled me. The officer silently nudged him toward the elevator. The briefcase with the destroyed documents, which forensics had already bagged as evidence, was carried by a young lieutenant. Tanisha was led out last. She was crying, smearing mascara over her cheeks, but she walked voluntarily. Her statement, written with a trembling hand on hotel stationery, became the nail in the coffin of this scam. She received witness status, but she had to spend the night at the precinct. When the corridor emptied, I was left alone. I went down to the lobby 10 minutes later. The huge hotel lobby shone with gold and marble as if nothing had happened. In the center, by a column, stood Reginald. Next to him, looking orphaned, huddled 2 rolling suitcases, the same ones with which he had left for fishing. He held his phone in his hands and was frantically stabbing his finger at the screen. I knew what he was seeing. Notification from the bank, card blocked, account frozen, access limited. I walked past him to the front desk. The click of my heels on the marble made him jerk his head up. "Bernie!" He took a step toward me, but stopped immediately. An invisible wall of bulletproof glass seemed to have grown between us. In his eyes, I saw a mixture of fear and bewilderment. He still didn't believe the old workhorse could kick so hard. Bernie, I have nowhere to go. The cards aren't working. I don't even have cash for a cab. I stopped, but didn't turn to him fully. Just slightly slanted my eyes. You're a healthy man, Reginald. You have hands, feet, and the freedom I generously left you by not filing charges against you personally just for divorce. I think you'll manage. Fishing teaches survival, doesn't it? I turned away and approached the high, dark wood counter where Kwame stood. He looked tired, but in his gaze I read deep, respectful awe. Mrs. Vance, he said quietly, the police took them away. The reports were filed in room 402. Our cleaning crew is working now, clearing the traces. Thank you, Kwame. I placed my palm on the cool marble of the counter. I have a request for you. Anything. Process the checkout for room 402 right now. Close that bill. Let it remain in the past, like a bad dream. Kwame nodded. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Done. Checkout processed. And now? I took a deep breath, feeling my lungs expand, lungs that had breathed at half strength for 40 years. Process a new check-in. Kwame raised an eyebrow. For whom, Mrs. Vance? For me? Bernadine Vance, presidential suite, the one with the view of the park and the skyline. Reginald, standing a few meters behind, made a strangled sound like a sob. He heard every word. For how long? Kwame asked professionally, though the corners of his lips twitched in a smile. For a week, I answered firmly. I believe I've earned a vacation. I've been serving other people's interests for too long, Kwame. It's time to think about my own. I opened my purse and took out an envelope with cash, my personal stash, which I always carried with me for a rainy day. Today, that day had become the brightest of my life. I pulled out several large bills and placed them before the manager. This is for you, Kwame, for loyalty and impeccable service. He wanted to object, but I stopped him with a look. Take it. You saved my life today, literally and figuratively. Thank you, Mrs. Vance. He bowed his head. The key is ready. Shall I escort you? No, I'll walk myself. I need to be alone. And Kwame, yes, send a bottle of champagne to my room, the coldest you have, and fruit. It will be done. Anything else? Yes. I smiled, and for the first time in many years, that smile was absolutely sincere, light, girlish. I have a lot of reading to catch up on. I took a glossy brochure out of the inner pocket of my blazer, which I had kept there for a month, afraid to show my husband. I placed it on the counter and slowly, with relish, smoothed it with my palm so Reginald could see the cover. On the bright photograph were depicted cypress alleys flooded with golden sun and ancient vineyards. The headline read, Solo Tour of Tuscany, Gastronomy, Art, and Freedom. Tuscany! Croaked Reginald behind my back. Bernie, that's dangerous. You don't know the language. You can't handle it alone. I told you. I didn't let him finish. I didn't even turn around. I simply took the golden keycard Kwame held out to me and tapped my finger on the brochure. I handled organized crime, a corrupt lawyer, and the betrayal of my own family in one evening, I said loudly, addressing the universe rather than my ex-husband. I think I'll figure out pasta and wine in Italy somehow. I took the brochure and headed for the elevators. My back was straight, head held high. I didn't hear Reginald leave the hotel. I heard only the sound of my own steps, and in that rhythm played the music of a new life, a life that belongs only to me. My dear listeners, that brings us to the end of Bernadine's story. A heavy story, isn't it? There is a lot of bitterness in it, but even more strength. I know that many of you right now might be arguing with the ending. Some will say, how could she do that to her own son? Couldn't she forgive, give a second chance? After all, a mother's heart should be soft, all-forgiving. But I ask you, where is the boundary between love and enabling? Where is the line beyond which sacrifice turns into the destruction of one's own identity? Bernadine endured years of neglect, lies, and consumerism. She gave everything, receiving only mockery behind her back in return. Her son's action wasn't a mistake, but a conscious crime. Did she have the right to close her eyes to this, knowing that impunity breeds only greater evil? Or, by handing them over to justice, did she teach them the most important, albeit cruel, lesson of their lives? It seems to me that the true strength of a woman is not in enduring endlessly, but in saying enough at the right time. Bernadine chose herself. She chose Tuscany, the sun, and freedom, instead of a cage of lies, and personally, I give her a standing ovation. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.